Well, hello everyone. Today we are going to fly the Majestic Software Q400, also known as the Dash-8 from its Bombardier days, twin turboprop from Portland International to SeaTac. And we're going to try and do this as a real Horizon flight. The nice thing about these Horizon segments from Portland to Seattle is that they fly every, hour or so throughout the day. So we'll find a flight that we will do from PDX to KSCA. And let's see what we have. Okay. Ooh, departs in half an hour. This will be a little tight, but we'll go for it. So QXE 2162. It looks like we are leaving off of A5, going to C16. So we're leaving, scheduled departure is at 4:30 p.m. Pacific, which, some quick math here, would be just past midnight, 30 minutes past midnight Zulu. So 0:30 Zulu, 28-minute flight, and like I said, we have 35 minutes to go. We try and get in the cockpit about 30 minutes before the flight leaves, so we'll try and plan this quickly here. 14,000 feet will be our altitude, and we will fly obviously north from Portland to Seattle. Looks like from Portland direct to Cougar, then Krieg, and then the Hawks 3 arrival into Seattle. PDX doesn't really have any SIDs that send you straight up to the north. They tend to be sort of straight out east, or I think the closest one that would get you to Seattle is pretty severely northeast. So that's probably why they're literally just after they take off, they're going to get vectored straight to Coog without really flying a SID. There is just a generic, the Portland 1. If we look at Portland 1, there aren't really any waypoints or anything. It's just a generic SID that can pretty much get you anywhere, where they just have you run, fly runway heading during a climb, and then they just vector you to wherever you're going. So we'll probably tell the computer that we're doing the Portland 1 SID just for good measure. So let's get this going. The first thing we're going to need to plan the flight, let's pop over to PFPX here, and we'll add this to our schedule. It's QXE, I think their ATC flight number was actually 2162, which is QX162 from KPDX to KSEA. And the scheduled time of departure is 0:30. And Horizon has this filed for 28 minutes, so we'll give that a try, and that puts us in at just before 1 Zulu. And we're going to fly it in the Dash-8, November 442, Quebec X-ray. Save that. So to plan this flight, we are going to need to know how much cargo we're carrying, or the weight. And to do that, there's different ways to do this. For, say, the PMDG 737, you can do it within the FMC to load it, but Majestic, you use this control panel application externally to set up all of your weights and fuel, and then you send it in the simulator when it's running. So passengers, let's just say, they usually fill up the middle of the plane, and say we have 22 there, 14 people toward the front, and another 10 toward the back. 66 passengers, let's say half of them, on this little Portland to Seattle, it's probably not even half. Let's say 30 of them brought a bag, or checked a bag. The rest, I think, the carry-on is computed into these weights. Fuel doesn't matter right now. We're just looking for our actual our passenger and cargo, what's called the zero fuel mass. So our zero fuel mass is going to be 53,633 pounds, 53,633 pounds. So with that, we plan this flight. and everything looks good. Let's see, Portland, we're at gate Alpha 5, and if we look at Portland ground parking. So A5 is right here. I happen to know in the current scenery or something I have in FSX right now, PDX ends basically right here after A4. They don't have the parking spots that don't have jetways that these Horizon flights fly out of. So we're going to pretend, and we're just going to go to Alpha 4. So Alpha 4 it puts us on the 28 left side of the airport. So we're going to go 28 left instead of 28 right because that is probably what we would fly out of. And if we look here, Portland weather, the wind is 290 at 9 knots, so 28 is pretty much perfect. The Seattle weather, they're showing variable at 3 knots, so they're not going to be using 3.4 realistically, they're going to be using 1.6. And because we are just a twin turboprop, they're going to give us 1.6 right. Taxi times are probably fine. And we already filled all of that out. We're still on for a 030 Zulu departure, which is almost exactly 30 minutes from now. And this is all good. So what we need to enter is we want 14,000 feet. And our payload, our zero fuel, is 53,633 pounds. So that's 13,462 pounds of payload, people and cargo, on top of the empty weight of the airplane, which is 40,000 pounds. So the only extra weight we'll be carrying is however much fuel we end up putting in here. Speaking of fuel, we just will look at this. We're a domestic flight, so FAA rules will apply, and we can add an extra time for contingency, or if we need extra fuel for weight, or if we want leftover fuel that we can fly home with at the destination instead of refueling there. But in our case, I just want a little bit of extra fuel for 15 minutes of fuel, because we're actually going to start an engine up a little early, and we could probably put it in taxi time. Actually, yeah, let's do that. Let's do taxi out 15 minutes, and I'll explain why in the sim, but basically we're going to be a little unrealistic starting one of the engines at the gate because of some weird interactions between the little pushback add-on I'm using and the Q400. They haven't really worked out all the kinks yet. Okay, enough blabbering. The route we're going to use, this was straight from what this plane is going to fly. Paste that in, build that. And you can see it matches the dashed line on FlightAware, which is we fly up to Cougar, Krieg, and then we go on the Hawks 3 arrival into Seattle. And our alternate, because it's such a short flight, if we can't land at Seattle, weather, all of the runways shut down, whatever the case may be, we'll actually fly everyone back to Portland, so they're not stranded somewhere they weren't planning on being. And we will land on, 28 right. It doesn't really matter in this case. And because this will give me a warning if I don't actually, so Helens and Helens 5. We'll just edit our return route here. Build that and apply. So, if things don't go our way, we get all the way to Seattle, we will fly back to Portland. So just double checking everything here. Leaving in 28 minutes, 14,000 is our altitude. I added a little bit of extra time because we're going to run the engines a little longer during pushback. And, yep, 8th of November. Okay. So we can compute that flight. So So what that did is it looks at the current weather, it looks at the route, it looks at the altitude I'm going to climb to, and it computes how much fuel the plane is going to use. And so if I look at my details here, you can see that it's telling me the actual trip flying from Portland to Seattle will use 1,358 pounds of fuel. If I get to Seattle and I need to fly back to Portland, that's going to burn another 1,233 pounds of fuel. The Federal Aviation regulations require me to carry reserve fuel of 45 minutes for this flight, which is another 1,913 pounds. So if you add all three of those together, I cannot leave the ground in Portland unless I am carrying 4,504 pounds of fuel. If somehow I get to the runway and I'm cleared for takeoff and I've burned more than my taxi fuel, I can't take off. I have to go back and top off. So we're going to add another 225 pounds of fuel for taxiing, which means that from Portland I am going to load up 4,729 pounds of fuel. And when I land at Seattle and get to the gate, I should have 3,071 pounds of fuel to go. And then again, just reiterating the weights here, we're going to start out with, aside from fuel, 53,633. That means at the ramp we're going to have 58,000 pounds, and by the time we burn off some during taxiing, we're taking off with 58,000 pounds, 137. And finally, when we land, we will be 56,800 pounds. So this is, actually here, I'll release this flight here. And let me just export this route really quick. This is 02. And if we print our OFP, which is the operational flight plan, that's the paperwork the dispatchers prepare and give to the pilots, you can see that PFPX generates a reasonably realistic OFP here. So I am Horizon Air, QXE 2162, flying in that aircraft. And you can see here that we are departing Portland, arriving in Seattle. Everything looks good. Again, this gives us the fuel numbers, and this gives us waypoint by waypoint, basically how much fuel we should have remaining. In a real flight, the first officer would usually just fill this in and track this as the flight progresses. Sorry, I got on the wrong page here. And that way, in flight, you can just make sure that as a sanity check, you have pretty much the fuel you're still expecting to get where you're going. And then the airlines use this for each individual aircraft to tune exactly how much fuel that burns in the given weather situations. So this all just goes back into some big statistical models. So with that, the last thing we need to do is, let's see, our release fuel is 4729. So back in the Q400, we tell it we are loading up 4,729 pounds of fuel, and we expect to burn 1,358. Actually, a little more because this doesn't, you need to subtract out initial taxi time, but that's okay. So if you hit calculate, we can see our weight and balance. We're within the CG envelope, and all of our weights are below the maximum takeoff mass, maximum landing mass, and max zero fuel mass. So that's all good. When we get in the plane, we should have 4,729 pounds of fuel. We're about 13 minutes from departure. I'm sorry, 23 minutes from departure, which is kind of close for me, but that's okay. I will see you in the airplane.